Viewers like you make this program possible. Support your local PBS station.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
If you were dining out in an elegant French restaurant and ordered mousselines de poisson à la maréchale, they'd start out like this. Looks like white hamburgers, doesn't it? But it isn't. Find out all about this recipe today on The French Chef. Welcome to The French Chef. I'm Julia Child. So many people just seem to hate fish. You say you're going to have fish for dinner, and they say, oh, I hate fish. Why do we have to have fish? I just hate it. Well, no wonder they hate it, because it's usually served in exactly the same way, baked, broiled, fried, and it's terribly dull. I'm going to show you a wonderfully original recipe, which is called mousselines de poisson à la maréchale. It's original, and it's delicious, and it's easy to do, and I think you'll enjoy it, and you won't find people hating fish after I've showed you how to do this. So I'm going to start right in on it. What it is ground fish, which has been pureed finely in a meat grinder, and you use a lean white fish like whiting or flounder or sole, or you could use baby halibut. It should be sort of a fine textured lean white fish. So those are three very good choices, and I'm going to grind it up before your very eyes. Now if you have an electric mixer, almost all electric mixers come with the meat grinder attached. And if you don't have an electric meat grinder, you can use the old-fashioned hand type, or you can even chop up the fish and put it through one of these food mills that have a coarse blade. But it's so easy to put it through an electric mixer that it really makes you want to grind things up. I've got a mixture here of both whiting and flounder. Look how easy that is. Then if you're using your meat grinder to grind fish with, as soon as you finish grinding it, disassemble it and soak it in detergent, and then it'll clean out very easily. We want 1.5 cups of ground fish, and that will be, it's about 3/4 to 1 pound of skinless and boneless fish fillets. See if we've got about 1.5 cups there. Be sure when you're measuring the fish that you press it all down in the cup. So that we have just about 1.5 cups there. I've got probably a little bit too much, so I won't use it all. And then it's going to be beaten up in a bowl with some egg white and seasonings and some salt. You're going to see this is a really extremely easy recipe and a very elegant one at the same time. Now this fish should be chilled, because when you beat it up, you want it to absorb as much cream as you possibly can have it absorb, and beating it up with a plain raw unbeaten egg white, you're going to see how it begins to take on body. I'm going to just mix it up here. Now, you see, just plain mixed up, it doesn't have any kind of a body at all, but as soon as I start stirring it, the egg white and the fish are going to combine and sort of make the fish hold together. It's a strange phenomenon. I really don't know why it works, but it does. And you'll just have to beat vigorously for 2 or 3 minutes, and be sure that you have your bowl chilled and your fish chilled. And also, if you have one of those miniature restaurant mixers, they come with interchangeable blades, and you could beat it all up in this, and it would be very quick indeed. Now see how that's now beginning to hold itself in the spoon. So you just keep on beating it a little bit more. And then you keep on beating it until you can't beat it until it's rather hard to beat much more. And a lot of this depends on the quality of your fish. If you have a fairly sort of a nice firm-fleshed fish like the baby halibut or some types of flounders, they have more gelatin in them, so they retain more body. Now see, that really holds nicely, and if you pick it up, it really makes a mass. So this can be beaten just a little bit more. Then I'm going to beat in some salt and pepper into it. And I'm going to use white pepper. Give it about 3 or 4 good grinds. And then I'm going to put in, see, that's about a pound, almost a pound of fish. I'm going to put in a teaspoon of salt. And then just a little speck of nutmeg. And if you're feeling very flush, you could use some very finely diced truffles. That would be nice, but we're doing it in the less expensive way. When you use nutmeg, you just use a little tiny bit of it. You can often get these little nutmeg graters which hold of the nutmeg right in there. But with nutmeg, you just want to be very careful and not use too much of it. And now I'm going to start beating in some chilled cream, and be sure that you keep your cream in the ice box so that it's chilled, because then that will go in nicely. And I'm going to add, see, we have 1½ cups of fish, and I'm going to add in all 5 or 6 or 8 tablespoons of cream. And you add it by a big spoonful and then beat it again. And then add another one. And with this, you can't tell exactly how much cream you're going to use because it depends on how the fish holds its body. Because after the cream has been beaten into it, I'm going to form it into cakes, and then it's going to cook slowly in butter. And if you beat in too much cream, the fish won't hold its shape. Now that's still holding its shape nicely, so I can still add a little more cream to it. You know, there's the famous French recipe called a cannelle de poisson, which is sort of a flour and water panada, they call it, which is boiled together, and then your ground fish is beaten into that. And it's very much the same thing. I think these are a little more delicate. Now I can still go on adding a little tiny bit more. But at this stage, you just want to be very careful, because if you get too much cream in, then you can't form it into the fish cakes, and it won't hold. Now, I think that's about enough. I don't want to overdo, because I hate to have them not form properly in front of you. But if you did slip and did add a little bit too much cream in it, you could pack your fish into an oiled mold and stick that in boiling water and bake it in the oven. And that would come out extremely well too. It would be a fish mousse. And so now I'm ready to form these mousselines into little cakes. And this you do on a floured board. Just use any kind of flour. And then this amount, this 1½ cups of lean fish, will make enough for six of these little mousselines if you're serving them as a main course, or 6 if you're serving them as a first course, and 4 if you're serving them as a main course. So I'll make big fish cakes and divide this into 4. And then you see that holds nicely there, and then you form them into little flat triangles, and these in French are called côtelettes or cutlets. You just dip it in a little bit of flour. You see that holds nicely together, but this happens to be a fish combination of the whiting and flounder and the flounder was of a type that held together nicely. But you never can tell when you go down to the fish market what you're going to get, so that's why you can't be exact in how much cream you added. I think I added about half a cup. See, that little bit of flour also holds them together. And there's our third one. Now, this was one of these nice recipes also that you can get any part of it done at any time that you feel like doing it, because you can grind your fish, put it in the refrigerator. You can beat in your egg white, put it in the refrigerator, beat in your cream later, and so forth. So whenever you have time, you can go on with it. Just washing the fish off my hands now. And now when you get them formed, you can also cook them later. And I'm cooking them in a pan with some butter. I just happen to have a lot of melted butter ready, so I'm going to use it. And you want to cook these very slowly. They should not color, or color as little as possible. And they're going to cook about 12 minutes. They'll cook 6 minutes on one side and 6 minutes on the other. And these also you can cook ahead and then reheat. And I have about 2 or 3 tablespoons of butter in there. You want enough butter, and if there's any left over, you can use it again you can use it in your sauce. And so those are going to cook very slowly. And then with these, you can use these fish any way that you would like. And I'm going to serve them with some asparagus. And if it's not the asparagus season, you can use frozen asparagus. And I like to try experimenting, making asparagus and frozen vegetables taste as much like fresh as possible. So this has been partially frozen cut asparagus, and I'm going to drop them into boiling salted water and let them boil for about 2 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to look at those. Those are going nicely. You want to be sure that they don't cook too fast. Then after these have come to the boil, I'm not going to let them come to the boil, so I just want you to see how to do it. After they've come to the boil and boiled 2 minutes, taste them, and as soon as they're barely tender, but with just a little bit of texture to them, drain them out. And I found that this seems to make quite a bit of difference. These were partially thawed when they went into the water. And then I'm going to put in some more butter. That's going a little bit too fast, so I'll move it over here. I'm going to put in about 2 tablespoons of butter and some shallot, or some either chopped shallot or chopped onion. I'm going to put in about a tablespoon there of chopped shallot. And then put the asparagus in and put in some salt and pepper and let it cook very slowly. Now this is probably boiling. This asparagus will shock some people, because I think Americans are awfully funny about vegetables. They've been buffaloed by something so that they're just afraid to do anything to vegetables, and I think that's one reason our vegetables are on the whole quite dull. Most people are afraid to boil them, or they're afraid to do this or that to them, and particularly when they have something like frozen vegetables. And you can do a lot with frozen vegetables if you have some courage and use a little imagination. Now this asparagus now, this can just cook very slowly for about 3 or 4 minutes, but keep tasting it. Now, if the frozen package people had peeled the asparagus, which they have not done, you see there's part of the stem end of it, but if they had peeled this off, it would be much tenderer, so that you'd have to cook it a little bit longer than if you were cooking fresh asparagus, which you had blanched and then had cut up and finished off the same way, which is a very nice way of doing fresh asparagus also. And this would cook probably 3 or 4 minutes, and then I think you'll find that it gives it a really delicious taste, and it tastes about like fresh. And now I'm going to turn over our mousselines. Those could have cooked at a little bit higher temperature, but it doesn't make much difference. The important thing is that you do not have them brown. And I'm going to put in a little tiny bit more butter. Then they'll just continue cooking slowly, and you can tell when these mousselines are done by when you press them with your finger, they have a little bit of a spring to them. You see now when I'm pressing them, they're still too soft so that they're not done. And now I'm going to begin a sauce. When this is one of the, I was saying that this is the most famous. Well, this one does happen to be one of the most famous ones. This is called a white butter sauce, or beurre blanc de Nantes, which means it's a white butter sauce from Nantes, which is in the Loire River region. And I'm going to start it out, and then I'm going to explain more about it. This starts out with 1/4 cup of vinegar. And this should be a wine vinegar, and a white wine vinegar preferably, because the butter is supposed to stay nice and white. And then we'll have a 1/4 cup of a mixture of white wine, or dry white vermouth, and lemon juice. And that's all to boil merrily away until it is reduced down to about 2 tablespoons. And along with it will be a tablespoon of minced shallot or green onion. This shallot, this little tiny onion, one's being able to get much more nowadays. It's a much more delicate than the big onion, and it's used a great deal in French cooking. If you can't find the shallot, use the spring onion or scallion, you know, that long, thin, green onion with the white base, and that's a very good substitute for shallots. And then I'm going to put into this some salt. This will have about a teaspoon. I can always add some more later. And then a good amount of pepper. I'm going to give about 4 grinds to it. And then that is just to boil down quietly, and then it's going to have butter added into it. And what this sauce is, it's a substitute really for a hollandaise sauce. And all it is butter that is in a soft cream. It has nothing else in it but the flavoring of the shallots, the wine, the lemon, and the vinegar. And the trick in it is you know, when you melt butter, it becomes oily, and then there's a white sort of substance that collects down in the bottom of the pan. But if you combine it with a very strong reduction of vinegar, the vinegar, for some chemical reason, makes the white solids in the butter stay in suspension, so that the butter just is a lovely white, warm cream. And this, in France, is served usually with pike, which is called brochet. And the famous dish on the Loire is brochet au beurre blanc, or pike with white butter sauce. And this is supposed to be a terribly difficult sauce to make. Well, I think it's just because it's that trick of having the butter remain creamy. And when we were living in Paris, there was a wonderful small restaurant called Mère Michel, or Mother Michel, and she was famous for her white butter sauce. And we went there and had her fish with the white butter sauce, and it was just delicious, and I was dying to know how to make it. And I said, Mère Michel, I'd love to know how to make this sauce. And she said, come right out into the kitchen. I'm making a big batch of it now, and I'll show you how to do it. She was so nice. There wasn't any secret to her. I think she wanted everyone to know how to make it. And she had a pan just like this that she made it in. This is a sort of a lightweight enamel pan that's brown on the outside with a black edge, and it has sort of a gray marbleized interior. So I went right out and bought that pan, and the next day I made the beurre blanc, and this is her recipe, and it's thanks to her that that I have it and can show it to you today, because I think you're going to like it very much. I'm going to get the butter now. And this, you really, because you have such a strong concentration of vinegar, you really have to use quite a bit of butter. And what you use is, you have to keep tasting the sauce after you add the butter, and if it's still too vinegary, you add more butter. I've got 2 sticks or half a pound here. I'm not going to use all of it, and it's cold and hard, and I'm going to cut it up into about 1 tablespoon pieces. Then I'll just see how much I want to add, and it depends on what you're going to serve your sauce with. Now I'm going to move my fish over a little bit. And then we're going to start beating in the butter. Now, you see, that is reduced way down. That's about 2 tablespoons. It's almost a syrup. And then you want to have very low heat, and you start beating in the butter. And I think the easiest way is to add the butter with your fingers. And nothing very much happens at first. But you want to have your butter cold and hard so that it will melt gradually into the vinegar. And once this sort of the suspension of the milk solids has taken place, then all of the rest of the butter does exactly the same thing. It just takes a little bit of a while to start it, but be sure if you're ever making this sauce that you have this strong amount of vinegar. That was 1/4 cup of vinegar and 2 tablespoons of lemon juice and 2 tablespoons of wine and a tablespoon of shallots. Now that, if you can see, is beginning to cream up. And you always have a slow start with it. But as soon as the creaming process has taken place, then things go a little bit faster. Then when 1 piece of butter is almost melted, then you add your other one. Now once you've made this sauce, you cannot keep it overheat because the butter will turn oily again. You can if you have just a very sort of faint heat on the top of your stove. You can keep it on that just to keep it from congealing. And then, once it's congealed, you can't heat it up again over heat, but you can put in some hot fish stock or hot liquid. Now, as you can see, that it is slowly beginning to cream. And this sauce is extremely good with boiled salmon or with broiled fish, and I've also used it with vegetables like asparagus and broccoli. This will take you about 5 minutes or so to beat in your butter, but as you can see, that is sort of a creamy look there, and you just continue on with that and then taste it after you've added about half your butter and see how it is. And I've got some more that's already been made so that you can see the consistency of it. You see, that's just sort of a creamy consistency. It looks very much like hollandaise. And so now we're ready to serve our fish, and I'm going to get my fish platter. Now I've cheated a little bit because I thought these mousselines would be nice as a main course. So I've added some creamed diced mushrooms. And actually, whenever you're filling a plate, you ought really to put a little bit of butter on the bottom of it so that everything will come off easily. Just spread it on with a rubber spatula. Then our creamed mushrooms go into the middle. Then the fish cakes are going to go on top of that. This really, I think this is one of the loveliest fish dishes I've ever had. I always seem to be saying that, too, because I certainly like the fish souffle on a platter, which was a lovely dish. Now, there are our mousselines, and I'm pressing them with my finger, and they are resilient. And remember, that's about 12 minutes in all, or 6 minutes on each side. And if you can cook these ahead of time, and then just leave them in their pan, and just reheat them covered when you're ready to serve them. Then there's a little bit of butter left, which I think I'll just pour over those, or I could pour it into my sauce, but it has a lovely flavor to it. And then here is the asparagus. I think if you try frozen asparagus this way, you'll be amazed at how good it is. That little bit of shallot or green onion is a very nice addition also. And then the sauce. Now you could, with this, you could serve a cream sauce or a white wine fish sauce or a hollandaise sauce. I think this butter sauce is more interesting because it's so much more unusual. There. Now this really isn't, ooh, that's a little hot. It's an elegant little dish, and you would pay a very fancy price for this in any elegant restaurant that you went to. And with it, you would serve a nice white wine, such as a Grave or a white Burgundy. And I'm going to give you those proportions again in case you didn't get them. That's 1½ cup of ground lean white fish, such as flounder or whiting, and 1 egg white, and 3 to 6 tablespoons of heavy cream. And look what a lovely little dish that makes. And now, again, as you remembered, we formed it into cakes, cooked the cakes slowly in butter in a covered saucepan for about 12 minutes, and then they were turned in 6 minutes. And try and not have the little cakes cover. And remember, with the whole part of the recipe, you can do any one of the steps separately, including cooking the fish cakes separately. Served on a bed of creamed mushrooms and surrounded with this lovely fresh-tasting asparagus and covered with that beautiful sauce, what more could you ask for as a main course, lunch, or supper dish? Or if you're having a fancy dinner, you could serve it as a first course. And when you serve your family these mousselines de poisson à la maréchale, they'll probably say to you, hey, let's have those fancy French fish cakes again. They're great. That's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.